Hi, everyone, and welcome to Writing and Influence. It's the show where we explore how the words we choose and the way we share them really shape the impact that we have as leaders. Today, I'm talking to Kristiana Corona. She's a design leader turned entrepreneur and coach who's bringing more than 20 years of experience to the job, including her time at Amazon. And Kristiana believes that design and writing are powerful tools for change. So she's going to pull back the curtain a bit on her own process, how she uses design thinking, storytelling, and sometimes AI even to refine her message and multiply its reach. And I know that whether you're building a personal brand, coaching a team, or just trying to hit publish on that first LinkedIn post, you're going to walk away with some practical insights to help you write with purpose and lead with influence. So, Kristiana, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
You know, something that I think struck me as really important in your journey is this pretty big leap that you made from the corporate environment to your entrepreneurial journey. So it just seems like that takes an extra large breath before you leap to make that kind of shift. So tell me a little bit more about what that shift was like, because it seems like in corporate you had a lot of guardrails and approvals and things like that. And now all of a sudden you have all this editorial freedom. So what do you do with that freedom?
Oh my gosh. That is a fantastic question. There's probably, I don't know, an hour of response in there, but I would say, so yeah, having a corporate background for the last 22 years, there have been a lot of things that you learn over time about how to write within corporate and how to design within corporate and how to establish your brand within corporate. A lot of those guardrails are not your own, of course. And so there are a lot of things where you're learning within a certain environment. And I felt like I had gotten pretty comfortable navigating across Fortune 500 companies, figuring out what is my brand within that? How do I write within that? I will say Amazon was the next level though. So if you know anything about Amazon's writing culture, it is very intense. It's very formulaic. It is meant to create excellence in writing. So even if I thought I was a good writer, I went into Amazon and it was like a big wake up call, right? Like you almost have to take English 101 all over again to learn how to write at Amazon. And so the years that I spent there, I think a lot of them were about how do you formulate, PRFAQ documents, which are press releases, and they're ways of expressing big ideas. How do you write a promotion document? How do you gather data and evidence about human beings such that it can be a very specific way of telling a story and you can convince people that they're ready for the next level, right? So there's just this wealth of documents and wealth of expressions and how they want those things to be formulated at Amazon that took a while to cultivate. But I feel like because of that, I have become a much more precise and eloquent writer in a way that expresses things where you're not just saying fluff, right? You're not just saying like, oh, this person's awesome, or, this idea is so brilliant. You can't say those words. Those are fluffy words. Like you have to use very precise language, data, back it up with evidence. So for me, that was really good, because I hadn't had that background. And so learning all of that and then moving forward into, how do I transfer this into entrepreneurship? It wasn't really necessarily my plan to jump into entrepreneurship right away. I knew in the future that I wanted to go more deeply into coaching. And I had gone through a certification at the University of Texas, Dallas. They have an executive coaching program. And so I had done that during COVID because I was stuck at home, and I had the opportunity to go to school at night. So I was working full time during the day and then going to school at night. And through that, I was able to develop this executive coaching degree and then go on and get certified through the International Coaching Federation. And so then that led me to being able to do that at work. And what was amazing is having that at work and then also kind of as a side hustle a little bit, allowed me to start developing a little bit of what is my brand? What is that thing that I can be known for, whether or not I have the title at this corporation forever or not, and I think a lot of people get stuck on that of developing their own brand and finding their own voice because you think it's only associated to the title. People are only going to care if I have this title, then they'll listen to me. And so it's like you kind of have to wrestle a little bit with your identity and figure out, like, how can I still be saying something that's important and it's something that is mine, while also navigating that. So long story short, I ended up in a situation where everyone was going back to the office 5 days a week, and I live very far away from the office, and I have 3 kids, and my parents were moving, and it was just sort of a thing where, I had to make a decision about, do I be there for my family and find a flexible way to do that? Or, am I going to spend maybe 12 hours commuting a week to this office? And
that's a lot.
I ended up having to make a choice, and I'm really glad that I did, to just honor my family and be here for them. And so I had already started this entrepreneurial journey with a podcast and my own I had stood up a business. I had started writing and trying to get my brand out there a little bit more on LinkedIn, probably 9 months before I ever made the decision to leave. So while it looked very sudden to everyone outside, it was this sort of, gradual journey, because I'm not a huge risk taker, like just jump in with both feet and don't have a backup plan or anything. I knew that I had a little bit of runway there. So I was gaining momentum even as I made that decision.
And I'm guessing that comes in really handy when you're doing your coaching, because you were just talking about how you kind of guide other people through that transition. So tell me what that looks like. If I come to you and I am, kind of a nervous entrepreneur, not nervous in sort of stepping out there and doing it, but nervous in putting myself out there in words. How are you coaching people through sort of developing their own personal brand identity and then starting to put themselves out there, like you were talking about, on LinkedIn or even in a book someday? What is that?
Yeah, actually, it's funny. I have these conversations with people who need to do it as an entrepreneur. And then I have these conversations with people who feel they don't need to do it because they're in a leadership role, maybe at a company. They're like, why would I do that? First of all, that's a lot of effort. Second of all, I don't need to. But I remember going to this conference by Brendon Burchard, and he was talking about how everyone's, LinkedIn or social media feeds are full of just stuff that doesn't matter, whether it's generic things that are being created by AI, whether it's people trying to sell you on things you don't need. There's very little real authentic content out there just meant for someone's benefit. And he's like, if you're not putting something positive out in the world, who is? So step up. It was said much more eloquently than that, but basically step up, and if you have people that you want to connect with and form an authentic connection with, this is a way to do that. And so a lot of times people say, well, what would I say? How could I possibly put something out there? I don't have, all these credentials or things. And it really doesn't have to be that complicated. I think if you have something that you're passionate about, something that you talk to everyone about, it's very natural. It's just you talk about the things you love and the things that, you would connect with other professionals about or your friends about. And you just start doing it. It's like really building the muscle and the habit of exposing yourself to it. So initially it feels huge. Like I remember when I first did that podcast, putting the post out the first time, I think my finger was shaking so hard, like, oh, they're going to hate it. It's going to be terrible. And then you just realize over time, I'm the one creating the barrier here. No one else is as critical or judgmental as I am about my own things. And so you just put it out and you start realizing, there's a lot of people out there who I care about that like hearing from me. that like having a conversation with me in this way. And it starts to become a lot less about you and a lot more about connection.
And when you mentioned talking about sort of that internal barrier, but I think there's two ways that we write. We write internally, even if it's the story we're telling ourselves, and we write for others. So whenever you are coaching somebody, how do you, and this, maybe this is kind of a duplicate of what we just talked about, you can tell me, but how do you reframe those internal stories so that you feel that confidence, that sense that you want to put yourself out there?
Mm-hmm. I think, first of all, it's acknowledging that is what I'm feeling. Fear, is this resistance that I'm feeling? Is it just fear? And if it's fear, what am I afraid of? And being able to expose that and say, oh, I'm afraid of people's judgment, or I'm afraid I'm going to look stupid, or whatever those messages are. Like if you bring them to the surface and you can really examine them, then you can start to say, like, how real is this? How likely is this scenario that I'm expecting? Like, oh, the world's going to fall apart if I put this thing out and it's bad. Everyone's going to know I'm a huge failure and I'm an imposter. So if you start to examine those thoughts and then you start to sit with them a little bit, you're like, well, I'm seeing other people do it and I don't think those things about them. And, if I reframe it as I'm a beginner and I'm just learning and I have to learn somehow, the only way to learn is to start. There's a number of different ways you can kind of reframe it to say, like, I don't have to be perfect right now. I don't have to be perfect the first time I do this. And I think a lot of us are secretly perfectionists. We want it to look so professional. We want it to look amazing. And so the thought of something not being that way and being associated with us is hard. But it is true. It's like the biggest barrier is just starting. And so being able to reframe it as I'm a beginner right now. And everyone starts as a beginner, even the best. Even Elaine started as a beginner.
Yes.
And so the more I sit with that, the more, it feels awkward. And yes, it doesn't feel good the first time or two. You feel really nervous. You feel really critical. But then, like, over time, through that exposure, you do start to feel more comfortable. And then it stops being so much about what do I look like? And it starts much being more about what is the message that I want to connect with someone else? Who needs to hear this?
Yeah. And it's absolutely true that you cannot weigh your first work against somebody who's done hundreds and hundreds of beginnings, middles, and endings.
Yeah.
So, and you're right. Everybody starts somewhere. So get started.
I love the phrase of you can't compare your step 1 to someone's step 20. Like
exactly.
It's just not fair. It's not a fair comparison. So don't do it to yourself.
Yeah. Tell me, is there a book or an author in particular? Is there any piece of writing that has really deeply influenced how you're leading and coaching now?
It's a tough one because I read a lot of books. I have a huge Audible collection and I am a fanatic about reading books. So it's hard to pick a top one, but I would say more recently, I really enjoy Dan Sullivan and Benjamin Hardy collaborations. So like The Gap and the Gain, 10X is Better Than 2X, Who Not How. Those books have really been instrumental lately, especially in my thinking as an entrepreneur and being able to focus on, like, for example, with The Gap and the Gain, instead of, again, comparing myself to this goalpost, which is always moving forward or always moving away as to, what is it that I truly want to accomplish? I have to look back and say, what have I done? What am I proud of that I have accomplished looking back? And how, especially as an entrepreneur, you're like, okay, let's get this business going. Let's go fast. Let's get all these clients, all these things. And then when the reality doesn't meet your expectation, then you kind of have to go back and say, okay, but what did I do? I launched this new thing. I put a membership out into the world. I, learned this through failure, whatever that might be, and kind of how you measure yourself. So I think that's a big one.
That's a good one. I have not read Gap and Gain, but I have read the other two, the Who, Not How. And of course, 10X is easier. 10X is easier than 2X. Let me say that correctly. What is your biggest takeaway from, let's say, 10X? What's your biggest takeaway from that book?
I think it kind of comes back to this topic of you're going to be doing things that are really outside your comfort zone. If you actually follow through with the idea of trying to 10X yourself, you can't just keep doing the things you're good at or that you've always done. You have to really step into this new level of who am I becoming? And that is not always a comfortable place. Yeah. And so being able to acknowledge that if you're doing it right, it's probably going to be scary. You're probably going to be having to put yourself out there in ways that you never have before, to establish your brand differently, to be much more public, to have a different role and allow someone else to do the things that you felt like you were really good at. You know, for me as a designer originally, I love design. I love doing that. That's my comfort zone. You know, maybe even writing to some extent. I love writing. But there are moments where you're like, well, I can't be a designer all day. If I'm a business owner, you know, if I'm the CEO of my company, I can't be a designer all day. And so you have to acknowledge what roles you're sort of starting to shed a little bit more or hand off or delegate. And then where you're stepping into something that feels really uncomfortable. And it's a good discomfort because when it's tied to that goal, I think you're always thinking about how do you level yourself up to that next role or that next challenge and what it's calling you into. So I'm curious, Elaine, what is your biggest takeaway from 10X?
Well, I think it's the fact that you make decisions differently. If you're shooting for 10X, you cannot operate the same way you've been operating. So it changes. I mean, just the idea that you have to get rid of probably 80% of what you've been doing that is that comfort zone you were talking about and focus on the 20% that's going to be your launch pad to the thing that really is exponential growth. Yeah. So I think it's just the fact that I walk away from that with a decision-making tool that allows me to examine my day-to-day activities and go, is this serving the 10X goal, or is it just me pedaling faster, doing the same thing I've always done?
Yeah, it's kind of like how you can cut through what is just hustle and what is meaningful work.
Yes.
Right.
I've told people before that, sometimes I was just busy being busy without stopping to think. And when you're really busy being busy, you don't feel like you can stop to think and reflect and figure out what's serving you and what's not.
Yeah, well said. And I feel like that's a challenge that a lot of people run into, whether they have their own business or whether they're also working at a large organization, is sometimes you get fooled that I am busy with meetings and therefore I'm doing the right things.
Yeah.
And that is the biggest misnomer, right? Because honestly, it's like you could be busy with meetings all week. You could have 40 hours of meetings and have gotten nothing done. And so having to step off the treadmill for just a second to assess, like, are the activities that I'm doing leading to meaningful change? I think that's a very valuable exercise. Yes.
So everybody back that up, replay that one more time in the last 30 seconds or so. This is such great advice. I want to dig into design a little bit more for a second because I got tickled when I was thinking about our conversation because my husband and I had this long-standing, he and I met when we were both working for Texas Parks and Wildlife magazine. And we would butt heads because he would say, there's too many words here. We need more room for these beautiful pictures. And I would say, you need to cut a picture out so I can get some more words in. So we had this ongoing, headbutt thing, and we still enjoy teasing each other about that. But so I think what you do better than maybe anybody I've talked to before is bring those two worlds together because you were a designer, you understand the value of design, you understand that every single thing has a purpose in there. And Likewise, I will acknowledge every single word should have a purpose or it needs to get shorter. I've gotten better at that over the years. But maybe you can talk about how design thinking has influenced your writing.
Yeah, I see all the elements of design, including writing, as being the canvas. So what we really think about a lot I was specifically in user experience, which is called UX.
Mm-hmm.
And the core thing we're trying to do is understand what is the problem we're solving here. And, is it meaningful to this person or the user who's going through this experience to have more or less? Is it too complicated?
Yeah.
Is it too vague? What are the stumbling blocks that someone might be worried about, and how well do we know what those pain points are, so that the solution we're bringing forward is actually going to solve the meaningful problem?
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes more is less, or less is more. Sorry, more is less. No, it's not. So sometimes less is more. And where we think we have to make something look fancy or, really exciting, sometimes it's like if you just remove a few elements and try and make it more simple and, less words, less competing things on a page, less buttons, you actually are able to really accomplish a goal a lot faster and make sure that people are not confused in doing so. So to me, I don't see them as opposing forces necessarily or completely separate. I think in our world, we operate with all of those things. So it can be interactions as well. Like I mentioned, a button or a collapsing element, or, how someone moves from one step or one piece of information to another. It all has to work as a whole. And so I think if we're thinking first, if we're reverse engineering, what is the goal in mind? What would success look like if this person saw this thing or read this article or whatever? What is the action we want them to take at the end? And if they don't take it, then our piece is not successful. And so it's really goal oriented. It's not just like, oh, I like it, it's pretty. Oh, that's a nice word. That sounds great. It's like, did we accomplish our goal? And have we solved the problem we set out to solve at the beginning? And so if you kind of think about your posts, your articles, your website, all of those different things that you use as a business owner as just a method for getting someone to take an action, whether that be to read the article or to book a call with you, or any different action you might want them to take. Maybe you just want them to get to know you, in which case use as many words as you want and as many pictures if that's your goal. So you kind of start with that in mind. And then I think it's easier to go back and say, well, what is needed here to make this effective? Because you'll know one way or another, are you getting people to do that thing?
And I don't think we always hear people thinking in terms of UX, user experience, when we talk about words. But if you look at it as the whole, like what you were just describing, is really being focused on that audience.
Mm-hmm.
So even if and I do this with people who are publishing books a lot, we really focus first on the audience and who's going to read it, and then plan the content. And if you're doing that same structure, thinking about the design of your words and how it's going to influence and impact the reader, what action they will take, what changes because they read it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Then I think we can eliminate the headbutting that comes with pictures versus words and really just go, what does the reader really want? And that's all that matters.
Yeah. And we all learn differently, right? So
yes.
Someone may consume your content best as a reader. Some may consume it best as a visual learner. They just want to see things. Like if they see a graphic or if they see a chart or something, it's like, oh, okay, it made sense. Someone else may learn best through audio and someone else may learn best through video. And so I think that's the key, is like finding the different ways of communicating that same information so that people who learn differently can all see and hear and absorb your content. And so it's like one isn't wrong and right. It's actually just, well, who are your users and are they visual learners